Hello and welcome to I Can't Believe It's Not the Mouse, the podcast all about animation not made by the mouse. I'm your host, Octaviano, and as you can see, everything's still kind of a mess. I'm still working on stuff. Unfortunately, that means that the lighting might be a little weird. I don't know. I feel like it's fine for what it is, but I don't know. I really gotta figure something out while I'm doing this whole thing because I don't want to mess with the lights that I'm using for my animated short, but I also don't want to look weird on this, but hey, that's what happens when you're using the lights for your short with this. Those of you just listening to the podcast, you have nothing to worry about. You don't have to look at my weird face and everything. But anyways, I'm here, of course, to talk about an animated feature. I know it's been a while. Even since the last video, it's definitely been a while since I've talked about one film specifically. So I figured, hey, might as well get back on it. I'm going to be talking about a movie that's been screwed over by its own studio, and that is the new Looney Tunes movie, The Day the Earth Blew Up. Before we get started, I just want to say, if you're listening to this on YouTube, go ahead and give it a like, subscribe to the channel, feel free to comment, and ring the bell for notifications. Also, if you're on Spotify or just any other podcast site, follow this show on those platforms. As of this recording, The Day the Earth Blew Up is not available in the US. It's not available to watch publicly for the most part. I saw this back in December. This was something that was released in some theaters for an award season run. As far as I know, there's no rules against reviewing it beforehand. And chances are this is going to go up by the point that it would be okay to even post it up anyways. So, yeah, I saw The Day the Earth Blew Up, the Looney Tunes movie, that Warner Bros., for whatever reason, decided not to release. Sucks, but at least it's getting a theatrical release. Another studio is putting it out. It's a studio by the name of Ketchup Entertainment. Not a big company, so I don't expect it to do big at the box office, but who knows? It might surprise me, and maybe it convinces Warner Bros. To do more stuff with the Looney Tunes. I think that would be great. It's kind of cool that we're seeing a 2D film from the US hit theaters, because that's been very rare. Now, as a result of this being a movie that hasn't been publicly released for a lot of people, I am going to try to avoid doing any spoilers. If I do, I will let you know that it's a spoiler. I'm going to try to go in on this as, I don't want to say vague, but, like spoiler-free as possible. For the most part, just want to say it's a very funny movie, so if you don't want to know anything, go ahead, watch the movie, come back to this right after you finish. It's definitely worth it. If you want to just continue watching, of course, just continue listening to what I say. So The Day the Earth Blew Up. This is a Looney Tunes movie. It's the first theatrical Looney Tunes movie that is fully animated. It's completely 2D animated. As a result, it's also the first one that I've seen that is just a few of the Looney Tunes, because when it comes to like the other theatrical Looney Tune movies like Space Jam, Space Jam 2, Back in Action, sorry, I was forgetting Back in Action, even though that's kind of the best one of those live action ones, those usually focus on like multiple Looney Tunes. Like it of course has like the main Looney Tunes you follow on those, but it's like, okay, here's like an all-star cast of like the Looney Tunes. This one opts to just stick with Daffy, Porky, and eventually Petunia is involved with the mix. Other than that, do not expect any of the other Looney Tunes to show up. This is not me spoiling the movie. If you were expecting to see like a Bugs Bunny cameo or Foghorn Leghorn, any other character, no. That is not this movie, and I kind of feel it's better for it, just because when it comes to the Looney Tunes, people often forget that these characters are not exactly the best of friends. They're characters that often tend to screw others over. Like, that's the whole gimmick with most of the Looney Tunes. They get annoyed by someone, they decide to retaliate. Yeah, like the methods of which they do so and the reasons why they do so, the settings, all that stuff is of course always different, but these characters are not like Mickey's gang. They're not always hanging out with each other, and that's fine. I don't have anything against them doing ones where they aren't together, because there's of course now a lot of material with that, whether it's like the live action movies, the Baby Looney Tunes, or even like the Looney Tunes show, which I thought was really good, even though it's definitely a lot different from what you expect from the Looney Tunes. But I appreciate seeing this go back to the roots. So like, yeah, these characters are just going to do their own thing. And like the shorts, we only focus on a couple of them. They're not always crossing over, and that's what this feels like. It's like a long Looney Tunes short. At times, it is kind of a problem with it. It is something where at times it feels kind of episodic, but for the most part, I think the movie does handle the 90-minute runtime really well, and it never, outstays its welcome, even though, like I said, at times it does kind of go on a, like, okay, this is feeling a bit episodic. But at the very least, things lead into each other, so there is like a full movie storyline going on in this. Basically, the plot line of this one is, going by the title, you already know it's pretty much like a sci-fi homage parody, if you want to go with that. Daffy and Porky live on this house that they were adopted by this farmer, and the farmer had the whole area to himself. Eventually, the whole place became a small, town, and Daffy and Porky's house are still there just because, well, they were there first. They're having like a checkup from society right there, where basically, okay, is the house up to code and everything? They fell it, so they're given a time limit of when they can fix it up to be up to code to basically still live in the area. The result is that they had to pretty much get jobs. There's a whole montage of them getting different jobs, and along the way, Porky meets another pig, in this case Petunia. They fall in love. Essentially, she gets him a job at her place, which is basically a gum factory, and that ends up becoming a big part of the plot, where Daffy, while on the job, accidentally stumbles upon this whole conspiracy with the gum where some aliens are getting involved, and it turns out that there's an alien who's using the gum to control the earth because he's after a specific resource. And I won't give away what the resource is because there's a very funny reveal, but as a result, Daffy, Porky, and Petunia have to team up to fight off this evil alien invasion. There you go. That's the day the earth blew up. Want to stress that it is a very funny movie. Like, if you're into like classic Looney Tunes or just comedy where there's a lot of fourth wall breaking, or just like the kind of comedies that, I gotta be honest, you don't really see on the big screen anymore. Like, I want to say like your like Mel Brooks style comedies, or your like parodies like Airplane and stuff like that. Like, stuff where it's like, okay, this is very clearly just made for shits and giggles. This is that movie. This is just one of the funniest movies that I've seen in a long time. There's a couple of jokes in there that just had me dying from beginning to end. Like I said, the reveal of why the alien is doing all this, because he's like constantly mentioning like, oh, there's a resource on the earth, so you're kind of like, okay, so what's the resource? The reveal is very hilarious, and it's pretty much one of those things like you're gonna have specific audience members probably dying from laughter once they find out what it is. And it's all just great stuff. Yeah, it's a very funny movie, and I definitely recommend it on that front. But even if you're not too into the comedy, which I don't know why you wouldn't be, especially if you're walking into a Looney Tunes movie, you kind of know what to expect. This one still has a lot of great animation to it. It's very nice how the 2D animation is done in this movie. It's very fluid. The colors are nice. There's just a lot of little moments where you see the characters moving in ways that I'm like, man, I like when I saw this in the big screen, I was just kind of like, I really do miss 2D. And look, I've seen some 2D movies in a theater, even, as far back as recently. Like, we get anime movies here. I watched some of those. I saw the Lord of the Rings animated movie. Didn't really care for it. Whenever they do re-releases, I remember watching The Lion King last year, and I thought that was an amazing thing to witness on the big screen. It's not like it's unheard of, but it's nice to see new stuff, specifically from the US in our cartoony style done. Because like I said, like the newer stuff is usually just anime, which I'm like, I got nothing against anime, but I do have more of a fondness of like this cartoony style over like the anime style. Not that that doesn't have any charm, of course, but it's just, preferences. But yeah, it's really beautiful to watch. Of course, it's also just nice to see a theatrical movie where they're not focused on getting a bunch of celebrity actors. And I got nothing against celebrity actors. I've talked about this before on this show. I'm perfectly fine with celebrities, coming in and doing voice work. As long as they can do it well, as long as the people behind it know how to direct them, I feel like they can do the job just as fine as a regular voice actor. Obviously, I think the people who do it professionally are going to do it better, but I do think, like, okay, in some cases, sometimes the characters, if they're made for the voice actor, I mean, if they're made for the celebrity or whatever, sometimes it works out. Like, I I can't imagine Genie being voiced by anyone but Robin Williams, especially because when they did get someone else to voice him, didn't sound so great. Wasn't bad, but it wasn't as good as Robin. Same thing has kind of happened with Rocket Raccoon, where Bradley Cooper is so good at it that anyone else who has tried doing that style of voice is like, yeah, you can do it fine, but it's not as good as Cooper's. So it really is not something that I harp on too much, but it is nice to see an animated movie that's going on to theaters that is filled with a cast of voice actors. Like, there's no big celebrities. Like, the biggest name you could probably get out of this whole movie is Wayne Knight as like the mayor or something, which is one, a very minor role, and two, you're talking about a guy who already does a lot of voice work. It's just that he's done recognizable work in live action. So yeah, it's really just a cast full of voice actors. So yeah, it's very nice. I mean, if you want to go support the movie for that reason, I fully understand. I don't think that this will make a change. Even if this movie makes, let's say it somehow makes $100 million despite the limited release, I don't think this is going to change studios' minds about, celebrated voice actors. But who knows? It might convince them to at least get more voice actors regularly. I mean, as it is, it's kind of cool that the Sonic movies have regularly gotten Colleen O'Shaughnessy in those movies to play Tails. So who knows, maybe a full cast of these will convince studios to do that more often. I don't know. Now, before anyone types that out, and I kind of doubt they will because it's not very well known, I know that technically speaking, this is not the first theatrical, fully animated Looney Tunes movie. I know there were some, like, in the, I want to say the 70s or 80s maybe, that some people have some fondness for. The Quackbusters, Fantasy Island movies, like that kind of stuff. Those, of course, I'm not going to say that they're not movies, but I will say that the difference there being is that those were pretty much just like, okay, let's take a bunch of short, give them some new animation to connect that all together as a story when really it's not, and that's it. This one is specifically just a new, fully animated story. It's not like they're throwing in stories from before or anything like that. Just wanted to get that out. Now, as we continue on to the show, I do want to point out that for the style of humor, like I said before, it's very much like in line with, like Mel Brooks, Airplane, like parodies, pretty much stuff that you would kind of expect out of a Looney Tunes movie. They do not hold back. Like, granted, it's not like the Looney Tunes are going to be like, like swearing or anything like that. I mean, that's not something that they were known for. But if you've seen classic Looney Tunes, if you're aware of what audiences they were aimed at, they were not aimed at kids. Of course, kids could watch, but they were pretty much aimed at adults in the audience back in like the 40s and whatnot, because those were the people that were going out to the theaters. So as a result, there are jokes in this that are going to be flying past the kids' heads, or that are going to be a bit more mature than what you might expect if you remember the Looney Tunes just being a kid's thing. Like, obviously, they're not going to be swearing, like I said before. They're not going to be flat out making sex jokes, at least not up front. But you are going to notice some jokes on there are kind of like, I can't believe they got away with that. Like, regarding the whole farmer thing, I'm not going to give away the joke, but when you see how the farmer leaves Daffy and Porky's lives, my first thought was something that was incredibly dark. And although the movie never actually goes there, I would later find out, like, oh yeah, where my mind went, it was exactly what the filmmakers intended. It's just that Warner Bros. Didn't let them. But I'm like, the fact that I was able to picture that makes me say that there's a good chance that you're probably going to picture the same kind of dark humor once you watch the scene. But I'll leave that to your own viewing. But yeah, I just wanted to point out that, yeah, the humor on this is definitely going to be classic Looney Tunes in terms of it's definitely more adult oriented than kid oriented. Kids can watch it, but adults are going to be the ones that are having the best time with the jokes, as far as I'm concerned. In terms of newer characters that this introduces, the main one that we follow is the antagonist of the movie, the alien invader, who I believe is just known as the alien invader. Funny character. I love the fact that it's basically, we're going back to a fully animated Looney Tune villain. That's like the one thing that I will say that the original Space Jam has over the other live action movies, is that they at least still had an animated villain. I think this one's a lot better than that one. I just think it's also kind of funny that much like that one, it's another alien. This one's a more traditionally designed alien, but I think the animation on the alien invader is very funny because it reminds me a lot of, like a character like Yzma from The Emperor's New Groove, where the character is very tired, exasperated from everything going on, and you can see just how angry they get at every single thing they get out of their sidekick. The sidekick being a scientist who gets mind controlled. That's not really much of a spoiler. You find that out right away, and I'm not sure if the trailers have really showcased that. I don't think so, but regardless of it, there is a scientist in here who gets mind controlled by the alien, becomes the sidekick, and there's a lot of funny stuff in there where he's kind of like a mindless idiot, much to the alien invader's annoyance, which I'm like, well, you're the one that made him that way, but hey, to each their own. And there's just a lot of great jokes on there. Like, of course, get a lot of, like the alien-like stuff where it's like wanting to take over the earth, and just like the way he laughs and moves and everything, but it never stops to remind you that this is still a comedy, because again, the way he gets tired from the sidekick's shenanigans, like I said, it's very reminiscent of like a character like Yzma from The Emperor's New Groove. He's from a much more serious cartoon, getting annoyed by this very cartoony assistant. Great stuff on that front. The movie itself is just consistently on that level where it's like it feels like a very classic sci-fi story, but with the Looney Tunes involved. So, there's a lot of humor in that. There's some romance in there with the whole Porky and Petunia thing. Not the greatest thing in the movie, but at the same time, I'm like, for what it's worth, I still found some investment in that whole storyline, at least in terms of getting it to move the plot along. Of course, the movie never dwells on it too long because it's still a comedy at its core, but it is nice that it tries to have that to anchor some emotion out of it. And for the most part, this is not a movie that you have to take seriously at all. Like, even once it gets as dark as it does, and once you get the tension, you still get reminded of, like, yeah, this is still a comedy. This is still just for shits and giggles. I love that. In many ways, it really is the perfect Looney Tunes movie. And it's a shame that Warner Bros. Themselves had so little confidence in it that they're not releasing them themselves. Because I feel like if they had released it themselves, this could have been a much bigger movie. It could have been something like, I'm not saying it would have been $1 billion movie, but it definitely would have made a lot back. And I don't know, maybe we could have gotten more. I know there was plans to do with some other Looney Tunes movies. Like, apparently there was going to be a musical with Bugs Bunny called Bye Bye Bunny. I don't know if that was going to be a theatrical thing or not, but who knows? It still would have been nice to see more stuff like that. And who knows? Maybe they do decide, like, if this movie does at least decent enough business, they decide, like, okay, we could maybe try again. It's a shame that we still haven't gotten Coyote v Acme, but who knows? Maybe this convinces them to release that. That's a whole different thing. It's a live action, animated thing that Warner Bros. Canceled, even though they already pretty much had it finished. Warner Bros. Is canceling a lot of shit. They're not the only ones, but they're the ones that most people are aware of. Since I saw The Day the Earth Blew Up on an awards-run theater screening, do I think it deserves to be nominated for awards? And to that end, I say, look, if it was another year where the opponents weren't as strong, probably. This is definitely still one of the higher ones I have on my list of movies that could have been nominated over, like, Inside Out 2, but I still probably wouldn't have put it in the top 5. That's not to say that it isn't good. It is, of course. I mean, I've been saying it's been good repeatedly. It's just, I feel like, yeah, you could have, I don't know, like, if it was a weaker year, it definitely could have gotten in. If it, as it is now, I can't fully see it beyond just giving it a bone because, hey, Warner Bros. Screwed it over, and it's still a good movie at least. But yeah, I wouldn't put it on the top 5. But, for what it's worth, I mean, the fact that a Looney Tunes movie that is in the style of the classic shorts is able to hold its own for 90 minutes, that's pretty impressive. Because I did worry before this that I kind of hate the movie because I was like, yeah, are people being nice to this just because of its situation? I kind of feel like that might be the case. Sometimes some movies get softer criticism from people because of the situation they're in, whether it's, oh, this movie was screwed over by the studio, or a lot of people are being bigoted towards this movie because of whatever reason. So they might put up the kitty gloves to, critique the shortcomings. Thankfully, this is not a movie that deserves that. It deserves your full critique because it is good enough to handle your full critique. Like I said, even if it's got a problem where it's kind of episodic at times, it never drags the whole movie down. And that was my biggest worry, is that it was going to feel like a bunch of shorts strung together and it was not going to hold up, for 90 minutes. But it thankfully does. I understand if it doesn't sound too appealing for some people that it kind of gets episodic, but for the most part, I will say, if you like the Looney Tunes, you're going to enjoy the movie, so it's not going to ruin your enjoyment of it. I highly recommend it. If you're watching this before watching the movie, go out and watch it. If you have seen the movie, go out and watch it again. It deserves your full support, and I think The Day the Earth Blew Up is a very fun movie. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you again next time.
The duck?
That's right, the duck.
You gotta be kidding me. Who greenlit this garbage?
Thanks for stopping by. Go ahead and follow this channel. Subscribe, like and comment, ring the bell for notifications. Go ahead and also follow my podcast and give some love to my Patreon account while you're at it. It's www.patreon.com/saicams. Again, thanks for stopping by, and I hope you come back for more in the future.